All right, we are going to continue on with our final feature presentation for this afternoon, and then we'll be back here for workshops tomorrow, and things will be reconfigured quite a bit for tomorrow with rounds and more interactive sessions. And after this presentation, I'm going to get back on stage and have a few comments, and we're going to give away some prizes, and those are only going to be for people that are still here today, so you benefit from that. And there'll probably be a couple of people drifting in with their popcorn, but we're going to get started with this final presentation for today. And our next speaker is visiting us from Austin, Texas, where he is a Vice President for Consumer Design of Blackboard. He is also a founder for the Austin Center of Design, so he has a very creative side with a variety of interests, and he's just published a new book, which he'll be signing some copies of after this session, that talk about empathy and how we can use that to help people fall in love with our products. So please welcome John Kolko.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody. I didn't know there was popcorn. I didn't get any popcorn. I was doing my sound check. All right, somebody saved me some popcorn. Thanks very much. I'm happy to be here. I want to talk today about where great products come from. And I'm curious, and I have been curious about what makes something truly great that we want to bring into our home with us, we want to share with our friends and family. So I sort of set out on a journey to find this out. And I think one of the themes that I found is that it might be vision. A lot of people believe it comes in sort of a top-down fashion. I talked to Joe Gebbia, who's the Chief Product Officer at Airbnb. He's also one of the founders. And he said, they're all driving toward a North Star at Airbnb. There's some sort of vision that's articulated at sort of a global or executive level, and then all of the members of the team drive toward that. I suppose there's a somewhat competing point of view that, in fact, process is what drives great products, sort of a sense of rigor or method that probably can be taught and learned. I'm actually falling a little bit into this camp, given how I learned design. And I talked to Alex Rayner, who's the head of product at Foursquare, and he confirmed this. He actually said there aren't a lot of examples of people who have gone through this process. And he's speaking of building a at-scale Valley startup for consumers, right? He says, how do you take a product, turn it into a startup, turn it into a company, and turn it into an organization? There's probably a third point of view, which is that it's just downright hard work, blood, sweat, and tears. This is a great quote from my friend Mark Phillip. Mark Phillip runs a company called Are You Watching This, which he says gets you out of bed with a tap on your shoulder when the game's hot at 3 in the morning. Right? So it's for sports fans, and it's for sports fans who watch anything. So like Little League games in Japan that are like heating up in the 9th inning, you get out of bed to watch. He said he pushed this rock uphill for, what does he say, 7 years and 2 months, okay, without making a single dime. He's now profitable. He said he was maxed out his credit cards. His credit score was 0. Right? So talk about hard work, right? Maybe it's just hard work. Where do great products come from? I think that there's this emergent discipline or idea or even job title called product management. And product management seems to be the way that great products are shepherded through the different gates of neglect and angst and death in order for a great product to emerge at the end. I spent a little bit of time as I was researching my latest book, which I'm hawking shamelessly outside, by speaking with a number of these people. And you probably know many of these people. They're either well-known or maybe they're your colleagues and friends. And I learned a great deal about what makes great products. And I think I could probably boil it down to a very sort of easily, attainable story that first somebody has to articulate a vision. There has to be a product vision. Sometimes that comes from people, comes from ethnographic research, qualitative user research. Sometimes it's mandated, right? The person with the biggest stick says, we're going over there, and if you don't like it, get out of the way. Okay, but there's a vision that's articulated. And then somehow there has to be consensus that's formed, right? And consensus is a specific word that's chosen, right? It's not compromise. Okay, consensus, if you sort of focus on it, is actually a little bit more autocratic. Okay, so everybody sort of gets on board of that train. And then at some point, you got to ship a product. And you wouldn't think that I would have to put this on the diagram, right? Of course you have to ship a product. But anybody who's building a product knows that that might be the hardest part, right? As I look over my career of working in agencies and working in companies, I have not shipped vastly more products than I've shipped. 10x more, probably. I've gotten killed, whittled away till they died, just sort of left to wither on the vine. And I think people actually relate well to that. So we have this idea of establish a vision, begin to drive consensus, and ultimately ship a product. And in the middle is this question of a product. So what is this product? Because when we talk about products, many of us think of like a flashlight or a chair. In fact, chair is like the quintessential design product, right? Anybody who went to industrial design school spent time trying to draw a chair. Chairs are fine. We don't need to design them anymore, except these are pretty gratuitous. We should redesign those. But centered in this idea of design and what is the product, I think are two sort of theoretical constructs. So the way that I'm going to speak through this talk is by talking first theoretically, because I get to wear an academic hat, and then second, talking very sort of practically. And I want to walk you through a case study of a startup that I was at that got acquired by Blackboard, which I think many of you know as sort of the 10,000-pound gorilla in the education space. So I could talk a little bit about the benefits and trials of finding a startup that follows this sort of methodology embedded in what might be a very sort of large institutionalized company. Let's start with the theory, though. Start with this idea of product market fit. You might have heard of this before. Sort of it is the theme of Hacker News or Crunchbase. Like, oh, you got to get product market fit if you want to make $1 zillion and become rich and famous. I think that there's three qualities to product market fit. The first is this idea of a broad technological or political infrastructure on which to lay your product. And I'll give you an example of what I mean. Google, as we've talked about, is many things. It's an ad company, primarily a search company. Karen mentioned that it's also a car company. You wouldn't think that it's a cable company. But to do the things that Google wants to do, they actually need to lay fiber optic cable, right? They need to see all of the speeds in the United States increase in order for them to realize the visions that they have for all of their disparate products. They don't have a broad political and technological infrastructure on which to draw, so they're building it, right? And they're actually literally lobbying, right? They're driving the policy behind that infrastructure. We don't all have that benefit, right? 4 people in a garage obviously can't lay the cable or the figurative version of that for your startup in order to make your startup successful. And so if you don't have that to lean on, it might be a reason why your product's not going to succeed. Talk about not getting to market. You might not have product market fit if you don't have this political and technological infrastructure on which to start. Okay? The second idea here is this notion of social precedent. I'm glad to see, I don't see anyone wearing Google Glass, and it's my favorite example to pick on. You look ridiculous when you wear Google Glass, and I think most of us know that. And I think it's because we don't necessarily have a social precedent for looking like a cyborg. Like, most of us just aren't comfortable with that. Think about the way that fashion sort of slowly eases its way into circles. We don't really have a great track record for that one. But actually we do. We do have a couple data points that point us in that direction. Bluetooth headsets are the first example I could think of wearing a computer on your face. And I wouldn't say that those are, wildly acceptable. Most of us still think you look a little silly when you wear that. But that's yet another example, sort of a data point on a path toward us saying maybe it's okay to wear a computer on our face. I don't think we're there yet, right? I think Microsoft's sort of venture into that as yet another data point in the path. 20 years, 50 years, I don't know. But you need that sort of social precedent if you're going to drive product market fit. I don't think that Google has any expectations that they're going to sell zillions of Google Glass, and I don't think that's the point, right? The point is actually probably to set that precedent in motion. The third idea here of product market fit is the notion of an opportunity for engagement. Engagement's a little difficult to describe. Think a little bit about if you're engaged right now and what that word means. To me, in a classroom setting or in a workshop setting like this, it means you're giving me your attention, right? And that's a pretty powerful thing to give, right? It's an expensive resource. You don't have a lot of it. How would you get someone engaged in your product? Is there an opportunity at scale to have product market fit through engagement? This is not scale, right? There's probably 2, 4, 6, 1,000 people, 1,500 people in the world, maybe, let's go to the United States at least for now, who might want to sit through and engage in this type of dialogue about this type of content. That's not scale, right? That's not Valley scale like Uber and Twitter, right, and Facebook. And so to get to product market fit, there actually has to be an opportunity for engagement in a broad, gross general population. On the other side of things, which for me as a designer is a little bit more interesting, is this notion of a behavioral insight. And if you think about product market fit as the broad, behavioral insight might be the specific. The first idea here is the notion of value. Again, take the conference as an example. You paid a certain amount of money to come here. And so you have certain expectations of the value you're going to receive from the conference. And it might be from me and my content and my colleagues' content. It might be from each other, right? You're here to network. And so you have a qualitative sort of idea of, was this valuable networking? Might be because you wanted a free trip to Seattle and your boss is paying for it, right? Whatever the case is, there's a valuable expectation. A value promise has been made by Joe and the conference committee, right? And then it's up to all of those pieces to fulfill it, okay? And to get to this notion of behavioral sort of stickiness or whatever sort of nasty marketing term you want, you actually need to deliver on the value proposition, right? You need to articulate it, and then you need to deliver on it. The second notion of behavioral insight that you can start to draw on and ground on in a theoretical way is the idea of identity, how people find themselves in the products that you make. Okay? Can they actually look into their products and see themselves? And when I think about this, I think about actually analog products more than I think about digital products. One of the sort of thought exercises I use with beginning designers very frequently is, imagine your house is burning down, terrible, save the kitty cat, save your wife, save your kids, etc. That pop culture reference was lost on probably 7/8 of you. Whatever. What do you save from the building that is not a person? Just do a sort of mental audit of what is the one thing that is most important to take out of the burning building. Somebody said books. I heard photo album. I've heard artwork before, jewelry, antiques. Very few people say computer. It's in the friggin' cloud, right? I don't have an emotional attachment. I don't see myself in my laptop, right? My laptop is a Lenovo X220, right? So yeah, I really don't see myself in my laptop. You see yourself in memories and in nostalgia and in emotions and relationships and people, right? And so for a product to actually resonate in a behavioral sense, you actually need to have a form of identity, right? It needs to be personified or anthropomorphized. And the third sort of, theoretical idea you should pay attention to, I think, if you're trying to get a great product, is this notion of provocation. It forces people to change the way they think about the world around them, okay? Most of the products and services that we're starting to see emerge, Airbnb, Uber, they're provoking you to rethink the way society has worked, right? A taxi is a taxi, and of course it's always there, and it's yellow, and it picks you up, and the guy's a jerk, costs a bunch of money, it smells like cigarettes. What if it's not? Okay, cool, now we got a business, right? It provokes you to reconsider things that you've always sort of known were just the way they were. And you're starting to see that, I think, and have seen it since maybe the last 90s at scale with almost all technological innovation. Changes the way we think about the world, makes it strange, and then all of these other things start to play. And if the great product succeeds, it becomes a little bit more normal. That's very theoretical. I don't apologize. I get to pretend that I'm an academic because I run a school, which is kind of fun. You get to be very lofty in your ivory tower and think. Product management is the center of that. Product management is not theoretical. It's actually very, very pragmatic. And I think the roots of it typically come from engineering. You look at Microsoft or Google, these companies have product managers, that's their title, who are engineers. They went to school for computer science, right? They're very good software developers. They write code. They know how. And because of that, the value, the identity, the behavioral stuff they drive into their products is typically feature-driven, algorithmic, right? It's about doing more. It's about improving and optimizing, right? Because those are things computer scientists value. And it would make sense then that they would drive that into their products as characterizations. Marketing has, I think, a similar background. Think a little bit about, say, Procter & Gamble or J&J. They have brand managers, which are very similar to product managers. And they might infuse in their products things that marketing and brand managers enjoy, like features and pricing models and selling more and new and 30% extra and fund size, right? Sort of these weird ways of thinking about how people consume. Again, makes sense because that's how advertisers, that's how brand people, that's how marketers think about the world. There's this third thing that's starting to emerge as a product management capacity. It's product management by design, and actually by designers. Right? Designers find themselves sort of in this place where they're not just doing the work, they're strategically deciding what to build. And that seems like a pretty cool place to be. It's sort of worth taking a little side trail to go like, how do we get there? Right? How is it now that we're all coming into this mecca where maybe designers can drive themselves up the value chain? And I would point directly at Business Week, actually, at creating a popular link between innovation and design. I don't know if they're the same thing. I don't particularly believe that. But they said they were the same thing. And because innovation is a way out of commodity hell for large corporations, therefore design is a way out of commodity hell for large corporations. And congratulations to you, because that means you just got a 30% raise. I don't know if you literally did, but if you look at salaries of designers in the last 10 years, $50,000, $60,000, $130,000, $140,000, right? It's a different world. Okay, and I would look directly at stuff like this. I would also look at things like this. TED Talks, Pop Tech, these creative conferences that are design-driven content for non-designers. Right? Particularly at TED, you have very affluent drivers of a lot of the big business that we maybe don't know about, going to these conferences to be inspired. And they own businesses that own businesses. And so if they walk away going, this design thing's pretty cool, even though I don't really get it, those businesses will absorb it pretty much from the top down as a mandate. And we're starting to see that in a lot of places, right? IBM, the CEO, stands up and says, we are now a design company. Like, they have 300 and something thousand people. They're a design city, right? I also would point the finger directly at this stuff in terms of why design is now sort of getting its glory moment in the sun, right? It's because it's everywhere. It's literally everywhere. This is the toilet I had when I was in Taiwan. Or I think I was in Taiwan for this, or it might be a similar model. And you guys see that right there? It's like, I think it's a bidet, but I think it has multiple settings. So like you can have pulse mode. This stuff is making the world strange, right? You look around yourself and you're like, this is totally bizarre. And designers make things unstrange. We make the world familiar. That's what we do. We're good at it, right? And so this stuff permeates the world. We make it a little bit more normal. Most of us got to a place where we're actually able to do that work by focusing on these things, by focusing on tactics and skills, right? By honing our craft in things like, say, usability or aesthetics or information architecture, right? These are disciplines or subdisciplines that have really specific methods, and we learned them and we got really good at them, or we're trying to get really good at them. But there's this other world of things that doesn't see design as tactical. It's up here in the innovation space, right? It talks about value, talks about value promises and positioning in the market, and it views design as a strategic competency. And most of us go, I want to live up there because that's where the decisions get made, that's where the good money is, that's where the fame and glory is. But I don't want to lose the stuff down there because that is what makes me whole. I'm going to bet that everybody in here gets off on making stuff. Whether you're good at it or not, you're like, it's not meetings and it's not PowerPoint and it's not conference calls. I'm happiest when I'm making things. And so it's like, how do you bridge the gap between these two things? How do you get the benefit of the strategy and the value and the money and never lose the fact that you're making things? And I think the answer to bridging this gap is actually product management, even though it's such a sterile word, such a sterile phrase. So let's get into a little bit of that to sort of understand if this might be for you, and then to actually get into sort of that more specific case study. Some of the folks I talked to who are trying to articulate what makes a good product manager began to tell me things like, well, you have to be a good storyteller, the ability to craft a narrative. Okay, Josh Ellman was an early member of LinkedIn, like, I don't know, employee 20, 25. He worked at Twitter. He's now at Greylock, which is a VC. He says you got to be a storyteller. Most of us would say we're storytellers, and most of the stories we tell are optimistic. Right? Designers rarely focus on the demise of the world. We like to talk about how the world's going to be fixed If only they had our new whatever, right? Tell optimistic stories, we can do that. Check mark. Frank Lyman, my good friend who passed away recently, said, I toggle between my rational brain that says, here's what the competition's doing, here's what the data says the customers want, and my emotional feelings that say this will have impact. He trusts his gut, and he drives his gut based on this idea of signals, right? He's always sort of looking at signals. He's bringing in data, he's bringing in inference, and he's triangulating on an idea. Okay, and so for him, a good product manager can triangulate based on signals. We're kind of like, yeah, we do that. Designers can do that. Check mark. 2 for 2. Mark, the guy who maxed out his credit card, he said, look, the one great skill of every product manager I've ever talked to, be interested, not interesting. Okay? Try to he gives us a good example. Try next time you got the Time Warner guy on the phone trying to upsell you, to keep him on the phone as long as possible. How are your kids? Where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to college? What's the best part of your job? Be interested, not interesting, and you'll slowly form this product management sensibility, right? It's a passion for listening to people. Check mark, that one's easy, right? Yeah, I love people. Gary Chow, who is the GM at Union Square Ventures, that's, they invest in Twitter and Tumblr and any other T startup that you can think of. He said, look, it's about curiosity. It's about if you were curious enough. He said, can we teach someone to care? Not sure. It's about how you were raised, but curiosity maybe can be learned. It's curiosity not just about design. We go to design conferences. Are you curious about other disciplines? You're curious about the world. You're curious about politics and culture, and so on and so forth. And then finally, it's this idea that product is a communicator. You're at the center of a wheel, right? Alex Reinert says, actually, you sit at the hub of the wheel, and you need people that can work with all other disciplines. And to me, that says that you're affable, you're charismatic. People like you, and they want to be around you. And I'm not actually sure this applies to all designers, but I think it applies to many. Okay, so all right, here are some traits that might indicate you might be good at product management if you were to sort of gravitate that direction. So all of this sort of gets to this place of okay, I want to do it. I get a bunch more money. It seems really fun. What do you do? What's the daily part of the job? And I want to show that with the case study, right? So I want to get real tactical now. MyEDU is a startup that I was at that got acquired by Blackboard in December of last year. I've been there about a year and call it a month. And MyEDU, this is MyEDU. MyEDU helped college students succeed in college and get jobs. Okay, so we had a number of free tools, an academic planner, schedule planner, personal education planner, ratings and reviews, grade trackers, right? All sorts of free tools for students. And we helped them sort of walk through this process of branding themselves. The way they branded themselves was through our profile product. Very similar to LinkedIn, except it doesn't suck. Okay? And college students would tell us it sucks. College students would say to us, I don't have a LinkedIn account. Well, actually, I do. I created it because my academic advisor told me freshman year to create it, but it makes me feel dumb. And if you think about it, of course it makes them feel dumb. It says started college. That's it. That's the only thing on their profile. So the intent of the MyEDU profile is to help college students actually tell their story, even though their story isn't mature enough to have built a professional network yet. They've done things, they've had accomplishments, and they can showcase them. And then we help recruiters by actually giving them access to archives of students so they can find the sort of needle in the haystack and hire them. Okay, so, win-win, win-win-win-win-win. So let me sort of walk through the process of actually that profile product, that piece of product coming to life, right? What's the genesis and story behind how we got the profile card to where it is? And it starts with sort of research stuff. It moves into this value story idea. We get into ideation and launch, and then we have this notion of a communication strategy. So I'm going to walk through each one of these. We'll talk about what we did, and I'll try to generalize it to specifics that you can actually take away and apply. We did contextual research, and the goal of contextual research for us is empathy. It's not understanding, and there's a difference. Understanding is logical, it's linear. Empathy is emotional. Right? Try for a second, empathize with me. It doesn't mean understand me. It means see the world through my eyes. See what I feel. Try to feel what I feel as I'm standing here on stage. And you can flex that muscle, right? And you can learn to flex it. So we do empathetic contextual research with college students, and we do it in their natural habitat, which is their dorms. So we go spend an awful lot of time with college students. And we follow them around, watch them watch TV. Sometimes they do illicit substances. We watch them do their homework. We go through their bags with their permission. And we get to know them, and we get to empathize with them. And I'll walk you through a quote, actually, from one of the students that I liked very much. She said, "Your resume is like your life. It's your golden ticket to the chocolate factory. I like to put customer service and management things and stuff like that on my resume." Okay. Everyone has a business degree these days, so I'll always be able to get a job. I found out about international business from a guy at The Gap. I didn't even know what it was, but I Googled it and it sounded better than regular business, so I chose that. And she says, "My life decisions are based on stupid things." Samantha's 21. I say that and everybody laughs, and for a second I feel bad because I put this on screen not to actually ridicule Samantha. In fact, I have deep, deep empathy for Samantha because I see this in every single college student that comes across sort of my world, and I remember it from my own sort of existence when I was that age. Samantha is the norm, not the exception. Okay? This is not to ridicule Samantha. It's actually to hold her up as what we should be designing for. We talked to a college student that told us she picked accounting as a major because it's the first one in the drop-down. And I believe her. And I believe that she did it, and I can actually see her doing it because, of course, she doesn't know what she wants to do when she's 18. Right? We also do research with recruiters. This is the office of a recruiter. And on her wall is that poster. Does anybody know what that is? It's a squirrel. It's purple. It's a purple squirrel. That's like the unicorn in design. The purple squirrel is the recruiter's unicorn, right? I want this really specific thing. Okay, and we talked to her about how college students respond to the jobs that she posted. And Meg said, look, students say, I could do anything. I could do this. I could do that. You couldn't say something worse to a recruiter. If you apply to 5 of my jobs, you're not getting any of them. Okay, so college students take this buckshot approach of, I don't know, I could be good at that. I could be a dishwasher. I could be a designer. A computer scientist sounds good. Right? And she says, look, you apply to more than one of my jobs, you're not getting any of them. Okay, so we do this research, and we can empathize with Meg, and we can empathize with Samantha, right? And the method here is actually really, really simple. It's go out and watch people do their job, live their life. It's not an interview. It's not a survey. It's not a focus group. You watch people live their life, right? And you get to know them so that you can empathize with them. Logistically, it's hard, right? You don't just walk into Samantha's dorm room. You got to set it up. You got to build a relationship with her. She has to trust you, right? But it's not that intellectually difficult, right? And so you could theoretically go do it tomorrow. Okay, so we do some research, and now we have a bunch of data, right? Now we know this stuff about Samantha, and we know this stuff about Meg, and so now we synthesize the data. Our focus here is on interpreting it, right? It's making meaning out of the complexity of the whole, and I'll show you what it looks like. This is the walls in our studio all the time, and if you zoom in on these are actually individual utterances from the full transcription of every moment we spent with Samantha and every moment we spent with Meg. We do typically 16 to 20, 3 to 3.5 hour long contextual interviews or empathetic sort of in situ things. And that generates 20,000 words per participant. Transcribe the whole thing and don't outsource it, right? You can't outsource it because you hear their voices in your head. You don't give it to the intern. We transcribe them all ourselves. I'm doing one on the plane. We're doing parents and K-12 research right now. I hear this woman's voice, and she's a special ed teacher. I hear it in my head. Okay, and we transcribe it, and then we disperse it onto these little notes, right? And they're all over our wall. And the method here is extraordinarily easy. You type what they say, but you go like, oh, it takes so long. 5 hours per hour of actual inquiry. Like, really? Maybe I'll just write every other sentence, or I'll just try to pick out the good stuff. You actually don't know what the good stuff is yet. Right? We haven't gotten there yet. You're starting to make a wall of content, and that wall of content actually holds a whole bunch of really insightful stuff, but you haven't made sense of it yet. We then go through basically 2 different processes. We make groupings, and we make them in a sort of bottom-up fashion. We take a note, and we walk it over another note and go, I don't know, they're both sort of talking about getting jobs. Let's put those here for a second. Or we take a note and go, they're both talking about how sad they are a lot. That kind of seems together. And that takes forever. In fact, that takes as long as you let it. We let that process go for about 2 to 3 weeks. We have it in the studio, and all of the designers, there's 9 people on my team, participate. You just kind of walk over. You're bored of fucking around in Photoshop, so you like move a couple notes around. You go back to your job. You go to lunch, move a couple notes around, right? So like you engage with this wall, and slowly you get a sense of the whole, and so does everyone else. Okay, we also try to extract anomalies and highlight them and hold them up as awesome, right? We're not trying to push away statistical anomalies. We're trying to actually celebrate them. The whole process is biased, right? We didn't randomly select anybody. We picked 16 people because they were convenient. So we don't care about anomalies and rigor in that way. We care about a different sense of rigor. We celebrate the anomalies because they point us toward insight. Okay? From there, we move on to this notion of insights. And if you take nothing else away from this talk, this is the most important thing that I can underscore. Behavioral insights, let me walk through sort of the secret sauce of how this works. It's really, really simple. Samantha said, hey, the resume is like the golden ticket to the chocolate factory. She emphasizes bullets on a resume. She thinks that actually individual discrete things are the way to get a job. She wants to have a broad skill set. She thinks broad is the right way to go. And she applies for any and every job that comes across sort of her world. So we write this insight about Samantha that says students think they have an idea of what employers want in a candidate, but they're often wrong. Okay? Let me try it again. We'll try it from Meg. Meg says, don't apply to 5 of my jobs. You're not going to get any of them. Okay, so for Meg, she forms an opinion of a candidate really quick. She looks at the resume. She told us something like 3 seconds per resume. Okay, cool. That's a really rich understanding of the candidate, right? She's looking for specific skills, but she wants evidence of that skill. So just having the word isn't going to do it for her. Okay? And she creates this narrative of the student. She builds this like rich story of the person very, very quickly. Okay, so for Meg, we write this insight that she makes snap judgments directly impacting a candidate's chances for success. These insights are provocative statements of truth about human behavior. They're framed as universal truths. We talk to 16 people and we're making sweeping generalizations about the world, and I don't care. We're introducing risk. We're making statistically insignificantly wrong leaps. We're building inferential jumps, and that's where insight comes from. Okay, now be careful, because in introducing this risk, we also introduce the possibility for failure. We're going to build on these insights, and if they're wrong, our product will be wrong. You got to accept the risk if you want the reward. Right? You want to talk about innovation and great products. We're not just talking about appropriate products and incremental change. We have to sort of be invested in this, and you might fail. The method here is actually pretty interesting. Ask why. This isn't 5 whys. This is 5,000 whys. Why, and answer it. You won't know for sure. Right? Why did Samantha say that? Why does she feel that way? Why did the person pick the accounting with, why did she do that? And tell the story about it. And then ask why about the story. And keep asking why. And you'll back your way in to a provocation, right? A definitive statement about the world around you. From there, we get to this notion of value, right? That North Star that Joe Gebbia talked about. We're going to take our insights and we're going to leverage them as a scaffold. So we got our student here. He says, I don't know how to show I have specific skills. I don't even think I have specific skills. A quick aside, we were doing some usability testing with this advertising major. I think she's advertising. And she had this portfolio of work and blah, blah, blah. And she got to this point where she was going to enter her skills into our system and said, I don't have any skills. I mean, you don't have any skills. Like, you just showed us evidence of all these skills. She thought because she was still in college, she wasn't good at any of these things. She's still learning. She didn't think that she had acquired competency in any of these. She was looking at people like you. You're skilled. She's not yet. They don't know that they have skills. Okay? It's important for me to be viewed as having a broad set of interests, right? The student, sort of stereotypical student thinks, I don't really understand what's happening in the hiring process. Black box to me. I throw my resume on the web, and who knows what the hell happens after that. And the key to getting a good job, the key above everything else, is having a resume and a cover letter. Because that's what they're told in the career services office, without exception. I don't know about you as a hiring manager, but I have never read a cover letter in my entire 20-something year career as a designer. I look at the portfolio, so take that with a grain of salt. On the other side, we got this employer who says, I'm looking to match a really specific skill set. Okay? I need to see evidence that you can do the things you're telling me you can do. I'm going to build this story, this comprehensive narrative about you really quickly. And by the way, I am really busy, so don't bother me. Right? That's the sort of world of the recruiter. Okay, so we got these insights, and we start to know these people, and we can ask the what-if opportunity. What if we helped students identify their skills and present them to employers in a credible way? Okay, little bell goes off. Switch it around a little bit, and it's a value proposition. MyEDU helps students identify their skills and present them to employers in a credible way. Now it's a promise. Now we're saying, we promise to you that our tool will do this. If you use it, this will happen. Now we have to uphold our end of the bargain, right? We have to actually deliver. But now we know what the product should do. Okay, so how do we get there? We tell a story, right? We tell a story of the problem state. We build on top of and leverage the insights. We provoke these what-if questions, right? What if this happened? What if that happened? What if we were able to do these different things? And then we frame this new capability. And we write it sort of as that value story, right, that you just saw. From here on, I think it gets to, I wouldn't say standard, but to something close to what you might expect in a software development organization. We define features, right? We said, hey, if they're going to have this profile that helps connect them to recruiters, they need to show their skills, right? So they could add a skill. If they add a skill, maybe they browse, maybe they search. What's the different way to get them to skills? Maybe they could actually substantiate their skills. Like imagine they put their skill on there and then they say, I can prove that I'm good at PHP, or I can prove that I'm good at illustration, right? Maybe they could be like endorsed or something like that from their professor, from their friends, and then they display it. Okay, so we came up with this feature scaffold. Again, it's not a unique way of thinking about software. And then we said, well, wait a second. We're a startup with 19 people. We can't do all of this. So what's the critical path through this? What's the best way to actually get this done so we can deliver our value story without sacrificing the design vision we have for this? And this turned out to be sort of the V1 idea here. We go into the lovely Jira tool and we write our user stories, right? Now we're in like the really boring, we call it the slog of software development, right? And we start to create assets just like any other designer might, right? We got comps. This is an early comp of what the profile might look like. Do wireframes, blah, 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 blah. It's just sort of your like rinse, repeat of building products. And in this case, I think the biggest sort of thing to think about is scenarios, right? You're telling a story about someone using this thing that doesn't exist yet. And so we always walk through a flow, right? We never show like one screen or one idea. It's always in a sequence. And then the sucker launches, and you're like, yeah, right? You spent months, you worked with the development, you sat next to him, you gave him all these artifacts, you spent long nights and ate a lot of pizza. And now you want to drive launch metrics. You want to understand what happened. Launch metrics are amazing. If you've never worked at a fast-paced internet company, launching is addictive. You launch a product and you know what happened. And when you're at scale, we had 1.8 million students, you know what happened at scale. It's amazing. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And it's so data-rich that you can't possibly know what happened every day. So we set up metrics as we launch new product features, and I get an email like this, I still get it even after the acquisition, of what's happening in the product. Get one every day. Every now and then it breaks because it's a whole bunch of Python scripts that are like really sort of smoke and mirrors held together by duct tape. And when it breaks, we freak out. We're like, we don't know what happened. Right? In this case, it says, new member acquisition, daily trends, top schools adding skills, top schools acquiring profiles, right? Live or die by the metrics. Okay. We had an interesting metric that we chose to live or die by: number of tiles on the profile, right? More tiles, more engagement on the student side, more tiles, more facets for a recruiter to search by, right? So we defined a metric for ourselves to test by. This is the breakdown of skills from our students in our tool. Just take a second, read them, reflect on these people who will be taking care of you as you grow old, and what they at least think that they are good at. A lot of people are learning the Microsoft Office suite these days. Good news. You get data, right? You get to see what is happening in the world. And again, at scale, it's super fascinating. Actually, I said it tongue-in-cheek, this actually tells you a story about what's going on in college, right? So now if you're in a position, remember that broad technological, political infrastructure to change policy around data? Like, I got some ammunition now. It's not just that I think students are learning bullshit. They actually are learning bullshit. I do like that leadership is the third one. That's good. So prior to launch, you try to identify the usage criteria because you're going to have so much data coming in that you can't look at it all. There's all of these complex packages like Google Analytics times a zillion, ComScore. They're so hard to use, you can't actually get anything out of them. So you have to define like 3 data points you want before you launch the new capability. And then create a communication mechanism so people can know about it. Right? We used to send that to every member of the team, including the CEO. Huge visibility in this thing. And that ultimately led to board meeting statistics, right? Like, the board wants to know how you're doing. Here's the output of the last month daily report, right? Here's how we're doing. And then you iterate, right? You didn't do everything you wanted up front because you were resource constrained, so you do it again. This was where we sort of started. We were like, all right, let's add some of that substantiation stuff, right? And I'll show you a little bit about what that looked like. We had a tool where we would prompt students after they planned their schedule. We now know sort of what they said they took. So at the end of the quarter, we'd say, how did it go, right? We'd send them a questionnaire. They'd say, well, they'd rate their professor. Would you recommend them? They'd write a little like, yeah, he was really awesome. He showed up after class, took me out for a beer. Also, I learned some stuff. I learned leadership in Microsoft Office. And then you could rate their teaching style. And so at the bottom, we appended this, what skills did you learn in the course? They were entering it freeform sometimes into the recommendation. So we added a structured, faceted entry at the bottom, right, so that they could add this in the context of the class. Now we know something above the data point. We have some meta information. It's not just that I know leadership. I learned it in Intro to Business 101. And again, since you're at scale, we can make a linkage there. We could say, hey, if enough students are telling me they're learning leadership in Business 101 or whatever, then maybe they are. And we can actually say when you're signing up for class, here's what you're going to learn. It gets pretty powerful. This is an example of just some of the design iteration. Again, it's standard wash, rinse, repeat design work, right? You're iterating, you're trying stuff, you're learning about facets, things like that. We wanted to show that you could actually attach the skill to things, so we started with this idea, associate it with a course, associate it with a project. Maybe if you had a co-op or an internship, you could attach the skill to that. And this is what it started to look like on the profile, right? You're looking at your profile card, you tap into something, you get sort of an interstitial light box that displays the design, and you can sort of scroll through what are the different experiences I've had that support that. We learned from our mistakes, right? The top one was our first add a skill box when we weren't getting a lot of skills, like that woman who was studying advertising wasn't skilled in anything. We said, well, hey, we'll give you some examples, right? Add a skill or some helper text, right? Add a skill or concept that you've learned in your major. Okay, getting a little bit closer. You can add software, broad concepts, specific techniques. Actually improved sort of the follow through on what people entered. We had this tile-based system. You saw it at the beginning. That's what the profile's made up of. And on your left, on stage right, are the how tiles look because it's any entry is acceptable, right? It's user-entered data, user-entered content. But on the right, we said, hey, a number of these are coming up frequently. What if they get like a magical little tile, right? Something that's nicely visual designed. We let the visual designers go crazy. And so it was like a surprise, right? And so there were some unique tiles. Again, we're making assets. It's your standard software delivery stuff. The key here is to make hypotheses, little guesses on how you think things are going to do. Watch the metrics on them and then change them, right? Improve them. But the key here is to not get overwhelmed by the data. We still had a roadmap of where we were going. We had that incomplete diagram of features we had pulled out and capabilities we didn't get to. We still drove toward completing that. The last piece of this story is communication. Typically not part of the designer's world, but in product management, it falls on you, right? It's a piece of your capability set. Remember we talked a little bit about associating a skill with a course. We had this great idea that we could actually communicate this to our students in mass by spamming the hell out of them. John S. said he learned UV vis spectrophotometry and general chemistry. Did you? We know that the students took the same class. We know student A said they know this skill, so maybe student B knows this skill, and we sent it to a bunch of people. We didn't want to send it to all 1.whatever million college students, so we created a test, and this is actually the email I got from the associate, the BA or associate product manager after the test. And this is her reason why it didn't work email. And you can actually see the open rate there. It says the mail was sent to 2,000 students. We received 414 opens and 53 clicks. Didn't work. Why didn't it work? We don't know. That's part of being a product manager too, right? All of this data, the data doesn't give you answers. The data just gives you context. You have to figure out the answers. To this day, I don't know. I have some guesses, but I don't know definitively, and we scrapped the idea, right? Because we didn't have time to continue focusing on it. We were moving real quick. Communication strategy there, identify the strategic metric and method you're going to use for communicating value, and then ensure that people can actually take action on it, right? It's not just a branding activity. It's actually something that engages with the product. It's part of the product story. The last piece here is this notion of community feedback. This is Zendesk. It's a tool that probably many people use for communication with their users. For a while, I was the voice of customer service at MyEDU, which, if you know me, is like very not in character with me. And people used to make fun of that. I was like the friendly face you would see if you emailed for help. But I want to give you an example. I would get every single customer support ticket. I just eat that stuff up. What are people asking us? And this kid said, where can I see a list of what skills have their own dedicated images? Remember we had those skills, and if you typed in a cool one, you got a nice image, and we thought we were being really clever. He was like, where can I get the list of them? I want them. And so I was the voice of customer service this day, and he said, I'm OCD like that. I found 5 on my own. Surely there are more. And I said, hi, thanks for writing. We like the magic of the surprise, so you'll have to discover the other ones, wink. And he wrote bad. He rated the customer service interaction bad. I'm unsatisfied. He wanted all of the stuff, right? And we talked, and it actually generated an internal discussion amongst our team. Do we want the magic? Are our users right? Are we trying to drive something, sort of special here? We didn't give it to him. And so the idea here is just make sure you receive every piece of communication that an end user touches, and that's exhausting, right? Again, at scale, hundreds of support tickets a day, right? You just eat it up. Let me tell you sort of the conclusion of this story. It's not really a conclusion. I'm still on this journey. We were acquired in December a year ago by Blackboard. Blackboard has 2,000 people. MyEDU had something like 19 or 20. Blackboard's been around for 15 years. I used Blackboard in grad school. It's been around forever. And Blackboard's enterprise software, right? It's features. It's sold to a CIO. It's sold to an administrator. And then people have to use it. MyEDU is software you elect to use. It's consumer-driven, meaning people have choice. Really strange marriage. Yet Blackboard is going, our world of LMS it's not a commodity. We're making a bunch of money, but it will be a commodity, right? 10 years, 50, however long. Direct to students, not a commodity. Students are increasingly empowered to make decisions, right? Students actually hold the future of education in their hands, not massive institutions like the ones we went to. We got to get in on that. Okay, so they said, well, we'll acquire a team that knows what they're doing. I want to show you what happens at scale when you're a little startup and Blackboard buys you. The bottom line is in 2013, profile acquisitions per day. And the variation in the bottom line is actually related to the academic quarter, right? People use MyEDU at the beginning to plan their semester, and they use it at the end to understand how they did it, and then they don't use it in the middle. And so we were averaging, call it 1,800 profiles a day. The line at the top is profile acquisition over time after we integrated MyEDU with Blackboard. Right? So any user of Learn who the administrator turned it on got the MyEDU profile for free. We were averaging 18,000 new profiles a day for a while. Right? When you talk about data, scale, the ability to connect dots that you otherwise couldn't see, and the ability to drive impact, huge. Right? Mind-blowing for me, absolutely mind-blowing. Okay, so we talked about this process, establish a vision, right? Drive consensus, ship the product with this notion of a product in the middle, and we talked a little bit about what it is. You're like, okay, cool, I want that. I want to do that. How do I get started? I'll end with the advice that the people I asked told me. Joe Gebbia said, get your hands as dirty as possible. Throw yourself into an experience of making. Okay. Leland Riches, who was head of product at Kickstarter for a little while, said, get some skills. You have to have street cred. You have to have experience in building something. And Gary Chow said very simply, go make something. Okay? So we talked about this idea of product market fit. We talked about this notion of behavioral insights. Ship something. Thanks very much. I appreciate it.